Not everyone is born with the ability to shatter minds with just a thought, and neither was Michelle Mindfreak. But now that she can thanks to an alien parasite, she'll use her psychic abilities alongside her persuasive powers to blow people up, shove people off perilous rooftops, and take on an army of the dead as well as their god. Can it be done? Well, we've got one way to find out. First off, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and go check out Act 1 over here. With that out of the way, on to the video. As our terrible telepath prepares to enter the Shadow-Cursed lands, we figure with a name like that, it's probably a good idea to pull out a torch to keep the darkness at bay. And almost as soon as we enter, we spot some folks nearby, so as Michelle does before most fights, we cast Resistance and Shield of Thralls to make sure we're ready to come out swinging. We go lurk a little bit closer to them, but hey, what are the odds? They seem to know us. Well, at least our last name. Maybe they're interested in becoming our thralls, so we go say hi and oh my god, was that part of the plan? Goodness gracious, I guess not. The first fight of the act kicks off to a rocky start, with our allies getting clobbered a wee bit and Michelle getting clobbered a large bit. Thankfully, these slinking shadows are just as capable of getting their minds blasted as anything else, and we also whip out stage fright on a few of the baddies to help make them miss before throwing a potion to heal up. The enemies do some more clobbering, even getting another strength drain on us, causing us to become heavily encumbered, and to top it off, start taking out our soon-to-be thralls for good. This gets us fuming, but first we've got to do some inventory management, which gets us fuming even more. Thankfully, with a resistance to give us temp HP followed by a Call the Weak boosted concentrated blast, we managed to take out our first shadow. And as we'll be making a habit of whenever we're missing a decent chunk of health, we use our extra bonus action to heal up. Next round goes by peacefully, well, for us, and we keep up our lasting routine as soon as we can. Unfortunately, the last of our henchmen are taken out just a moment later, and we start taking some small hits too. With the amount of temp HP we get each turn and being able to cast Sanctuary whenever we need to get into a better spot, the enemies really can't do much to us though. So as long as we play our turns not completely foolishly, it's just a matter of time until Sea Blast takes out every single stinking shade. And Jonas too in the end. Maybe we'll find some thralls elsewhere. This lets us hit level 6 right out the gate, and level 3 in Cleric. This doesn't give us a ton past just more spell slots, including level 2 spell slots, but there's not a ton of level 2 spells that are particularly useful for us. Regardless, trust me when I say just having more spell slots is going to be such a huge deal for us, both for healing as well as being able to use Sanctuary more often. After all, we've got some long fights coming up. In our search for thralls, we head down the road and find an inn, and also a silly guard that thinks we need weapons to kill them. Ha! Oh no, I guess Jaheira didn't find that one nearly as funny as Michelle did, and she also seems to be under the impression we're a true soul just because we got a tadpole in our heads, and also maybe because we helped them massacre a druid grove. But when all looks lost, true soul Marcus vouches for us as he's managed to fool a lot of them, even convincing them we've met before and fought together. So naturally we throw him under the bus, kinda just to mess with him and also to prove ourselves the dominant mind destroyer. He does not take this well, and as initiative starts he summons a bajillion little hands to come be a nuisance, and at the same time vanishes into thin air. The bajillion little hands don't stand much of a chance at all though, and also give us a sizable chunk of XP, so thanks for that, Marky Mark. Afterwards, we show Jaheira our cool space Rubik's Cube, and she decides we're cool enough to come live it up with them, a mistake she will soon regret. Before we make him regret it though, we head to everyone's second favorite last light vendor, Quartermaster Tally, where we buy the Cloak of Protection. This fantastic little item grants us +1 to our AC and all of our saving throws. Doesn't get much more simple or much better than that. This is going to be our cloak for the rest of the game. Then we head over to everyone's first favorite last light vendor. Oh, right. Scratch that. We have a quick chat with Jaheira and even managed to lie to her well under the effects of a truth serum. She tells us about Ketheric Thorm, a local immortal warlord who's serving the Absolute and thinks he's hot stuff. We'll have to show him who's really in charge. But first, let's head upstairs to talk to the resident cleric who can help us out with the Shadow Curse. Just in case she tries to hurt us instead, we throw on our usual pre-combat setup, complete with Sanctuary this time too. Instead, things go quite the opposite direction. She shows off some moon magic, foreshadows her near death in typical dramatic fashion, and gives us a blessing that prevents the lesser effects of the Shadow Curse, as well as grants us resistance to magical necrotic damage. And just as soon as we're done, Marky Mark shows up again and asks for our help kidnapping Isabel, and you know what? That sounds like fun. We're in. The fight kicks off and Marcus just kinda leaves. I don't know honestly, but we start blasting away at Isabel while our hellish hench warriors take out Jaheira and the rest of the inn. Before you know it, they zoom back upstairs and manage to take out poor old Izzy too without much of a fight at all. This does however result in us being stuck outside surrounded by a million Shadow Cursed undead as Marcus zooms off to go take his plunder back to HQ at Moonrise Towers. There's not much these fellas can really do to us since they're just weak little zombies, so we get a blast in to start thinning them down. We do also use Stage Fright to further weaken them and get some mass AoE damage going. And since we're using all our resources anyways, we drop a repulsor to speed things up as well. Regardless, it still takes quite a long time since there's so many of them and they average about 50 HP. Our current Call the Weak threshold is 12 too, and we're dealing around 10 damage per blast on average, meaning it takes about 4 4 blasts to take out each person. Not to mention some plants spawned halfway through the fight that are immune to psychic, which I mean, yeah, they're plants, I probably should have seen that one coming. So we just focus on taking out everyone here that can actually be damaged by us, and once that's all done, we flee from combat to get out of dodge. We do have to come back and very quietly sneak past the vision cones of all the plants though, just because we don't have any other waypoints in Act 2 quite yet. Our next destination is Moonrise Towers itself, where we will no doubt find more tadpoles to boost up our power level. And as we're heading there, we find a way to resist the more powerful parts of the Shadow Curse being carried by a big ol' half spider, half drow. What would you even call something like that? A spow? No, that's ridiculous. Anyways, we intimidate the fellow into giving us his shiny lantern, no problem, and then trick him and his entourage into thinking we've blessed them and they'll be protected anyways before sending them on their way. As they scream in the distance, we cackle evilly before taking a look at the lantern. Turns out there's a pixie trapped inside, desperately wanting to be free, and mainly so we don't have to listen to her constantly, we give in, and momentarily enthrall her into giving us a trinket that protects us from the entirety of the curse. Thanks to this, we're able to pretty easily just saunter along the path and find Moonrise Towers. Inside the audience hall, we find Minthara being reprimanded for failing her mission, and seeing an opportunity, we use our malicious mental mastery to force her to admit guilt. Ketheric Thorm proves himself to be at least somewhat competent when he issues her punishment, especially so when he decides to take out her pathetic goons as well. And even though they don't take to that idea too kindly, not too kindly at all, he uses the chance to show off just how immortal and ruthless he is. Mr. Thorm heads off for a smoke break, and the rest of the goblins are ours to deal with, and boy do we deal with them, using a good old-fashioned force choke to take them out. Now that all that drama is out of the way, Moonrise is ours to explore. We mind control some gnolls to turn on their master, which goes exactly as we'd hoped, and we get a parasite out of it. Then we're off to the docks, where we find a barrel with a couple more tadpoles inside, which we naturally yoink and fast travel out before we get caught in the act. We use these 3 specimens we got to unlock all remaining powers we can currently get at this point in the game: Charm, Luck of the Far Realms, and Ability Drain. Charm is a reaction with unlimited uses that can be used after an enemy attacks us, and should they fail a wisdom save, which they'll have advantage on because we're in combat with them and it's a charm effect, they will be charmed until the start of their next turn. Basically, it's really bad and borderline useless, and I kept trying it for quite a while until I eventually decided to just turn it off in the reactions menu because it wasn't worth clicking away the pop-up. Luck of the Far Realms, once per long rest, lets us turn one successful attack into a critical hit. Normally pretty insane, but for now we can't make attack rolls, so literally useless unfortunately. And last of all, Ability Drain, a passive that triggers once per turn and reduces the ability score of whoever we hit with an attack based off the ability we use to make said attack. Once again, not bad to have normally, but currently useless for us. Either way, with these 3, our Call the Weak threshold is now 15, which is phenomenal. Continuing on, we find Minthara in the prisons, who's currently being tortured, and as our final revenge for her trying to murder us in Act 1, we let her mind be completely wiped, making her become but a mindless shell. That'll teach you to cross Michelle, mind freak. After we're done with all of our Moonrise meandering, we get to have a talk with Zarel, Ketheric's first mate. She lets us know that Papa Thorm's favorite necromancer has gone off to the Thorm Mausoleum in search of some sort of relic, and from the sounds of it, is in need of assistance. If it's important to Ketheric, that means it's prime material to mess with him, so we've got a destination in mind. Before we go picking any fights though, we head downstairs and buy the Fistbreaker Helm from Lantarv. This is replacing our haste helm and gives us a +1 to our spell save DC, which helps out our Illithid powers as well as +1 to initiative rolls, which isn't the biggest deal since we can always go into combat with Sanctuary active, but it's still a nice handy thing to have. A mausoleum with a powerful necromancer, and it sounds a little rough for us right now, so before that we decide to assert our power over some weaker villains. As we're looking around for some folks to fight, we stumble upon our old friends we sent into the curse alongside the Drow Spider. Drider, maybe? No, that's just silly. One of them shoots us right off the bat, dealing a pretty hefty chunk of damage, but we kill him with a blast of our own in turn. And we quickly realize these guys can't dash for whatever reason, so we just spend our turns blasting folks and using our extra bonus action to dash and keep them at a distance. So long as we continue this strategy, they can't ever get close enough to do any damage to us, and we lure them over to Moonrise in the hopes that the folks there will help us out. They don't, but hey, it was a reasonable hope. All that means is that it takes a little bit longer, but in the end, the fight goes exactly as you'd expect it to. Since the city has been made a bit more walkable, we walk on over to the toll house where we meet Jaren Gothi Thorm, who very much so requires gold. So, kinda curious as to what would happen if we do, we just give her all of our gold. To which she responds by roasting us and then trying to murder us. So you know what, Jerry? You deserve what's about to happen to you. She does get a mean hit on us at the start of combat, but since her damage scales with how much gold we have, and as of 10 seconds ago we don't have any gold, she doesn't do much to us. When it gets to us, we disengage into a resistance concentrated blast combo on one of the floating skulls that follow Miss Thorm, dealing double damage since they're vulnerable to psychic. Then we head up onto the roof and wait for them to follow us so our plan can come to fruition. Unfortunately, we didn't put nearly as much distance between us and them as we should have, as all the skulls come up and start blasting away at us. We even fail a few saves, which results in us getting silenced and slowed. So when it's back to Michelle, we dash disengage in an attempt to get far enough away that the skulls dash, which doesn't work out on all of them as most still get their hits on us. Things start to look much better for us when we get a repulsor off right in the middle of them, which sends Jaren Gothi flying to the streets below, taking a whopping 373 falling damage and removing her from the fight. From there, we heal up and cast resistance and get ready to toast all these spectral skulls. They start hitting us with all their various pecks of damage, but it's become pretty clear that we can tank through their hits and heal up on our turn, which means it's time to fire up the Sea Blast machine. After no more than a couple hits on each of them, we head downstairs to show Garen Gothi why you don't mess with Michelle and finish up the encounter. Thankfully, we get our gold back and then some by taking this toll house for all it's worth. Feeling much more confident, we decide it's time to meet Balthazar and see if he's got some power-ups for us. For better or worse though, outside the mausoleum we bump into Raphael, who continues to patronize us as he tells us in his own way about an infernal interloper locked away inside. And as he asks us to slaughter said devil, I must admit, as much as Michelle loathes being bossed around, it would be fun to kill such a creature with just our mind. We note his request and continue on inside, solving the consequence-free puzzle that awaits us by just mashing away on the, by using our powerful mind to solve the harrowing contraption and then taking the elevator into the Sharn Gauntlet of Trials below. What awaits is yet another puzzle, which is easily solved by approaching directly from the east to avoid the invisible wall, followed up by pressing the button in the center. This allows us to head through a number of different pathways, and Michelle's craven instincts direct us towards this mushroom-laden path where we get the feeling an ambush awaits, and as such we down an elixir of vigilance and precast resistance before heading in. As the fight breaks out, it's really not that bad, just a lonesome cloaker that can never do enough damage to pierce through our temp HP in a meaningful way, so we get blasting and a blasting some more. In the end, it's just 10 or so rounds of this before our cloaked combatant is down for good, leaving the rest of the way open. Deeper in, we find a room with a few skeletons clacking around and make sure to do our pre-combat ritual yet again, minus Sanctuary. Turns out there's some pretty chill skeletons being controlled by Balthazar, who doesn't know we're here to usurp Ketheric, so we have a pretty calm chat. Until the whole place starts shaking while dark portals appear on the ground and hordes of undead dark justiciars pour out of nowhere. Another fight kicks off, and this one is an absolute doozy. There's loads of portals spawning loads of enemies, and even though we do start with a few allies, they don't go after the spawners, and we can't actually damage them since they're immune to psychic. This ends up being a bit of a problem, since there ends up being just under a billion bozos with around 50 HP each. If we punch those numbers into our calculator, we'll find it'll take us 80,000 rounds to do. Regardless, we give it an honest go and make a decent bit of progress before we get a little too close to an edge and learn the hard way these guys can, in fact, shove. Which is honestly probably for the best. Instead of going through the full slog again, we head to the Mason's Guild in town where we enter the basement, fight off a wrathful wraith, and head into a secret stash where we find a guaranteed scroll of knock. Then we head back to the fight and this time use our scroll to pop open the door to the room where Balthazar is hiding out, causing him to join the fight. From here we mostly just watch the fight between the two factions and fire off the odd blast in the crowd to help out poor Balthy. While the tactic does end up helping out a ton, the naughty necromancer is still pretty quickly brought to his knees. Guess there was a reason he was hiding. Either way, that saves us having to betray him ourselves. Unfortunately, now it's just up to Michelle. We start kiting away deeper into the gauntlet and blasting away as we do so. In just a few turns we manage to lure our angry mob to a nearby cliff, this time with Sanctuary on just to make sure we don't get shoved, and put Force Tunnel to work on the big boss, sending him plummeting down to his mild inconvenience. We'll get them later. The remaining enemies do their best to get at us, but with our 23 AC they are sorely lacking, and it's just a matter of time as we pick them all off very, very slowly. Michelle really doesn't like letting folks get away, so we also climb down to pick off the big fella, who is not much of a threat when he's by himself. As a sweet reward for our efforts, we hit level 7 and level 4 in Cleric, granting us more spell slots and a new cantrip for which we take light, since not only does it negatively affect a bunch of enemies in this act, but it also helps with this act just being hard to see in. And we also gain a feat. While there is a lot of great options, we ended up going with Heavy Armor Master, which increases our strength by 1 up to 12. Which is nice, but more importantly, it also reduces all non-magical attack damage we take by 3 while wearing heavy armor. This boosts our survivability and makes our temp HP that we get each resistance cast that much stronger. And while Ketheric's bestie is no longer around to give us any power-ups, the vault near his room is still perfectly intact, and inside we find the Callous glow ring. This little trinket is our next long-term item and grants an additional 2 radiant damage against any creature in light. It's not a ton of damage in a vacuum, anything, but my god is it great for us, since it's one of the only damage writers that works with Illithid powers, and is part of the reason why we took the light cantrip to begin with. Since we've got a bit more power, it's time to assert ourselves as the true rulers of this shadow-cursed town. We've taken out the taxman, now we're going after the village doctor. We head inside his house of healing and find him demonstrating his practice for some students on some poor sod. Now, we're not one to interrupt a good torture session, but when we get spotted and their attention turns to us, we gotta think fast. Michelle uses our gift of gab to convince the evil doctor to set his students on each other, only for him to turn his attention to us afterwards, and unfortunately, we don't have the stuff to convince the fellow to take himself out too, and a fight kicks off. Malice, and yes, that's really his name, immediately starts resurrecting his nurses, and we find out quickly this is a level 5 spell he can cast every turn, which means Psionic Backlash deals real good damage to him. A quick wicked plot forms in our heads. We take out the sister he brought back and swiftly run over to all their corpses and loot their weapons, which they normally use to buff the doctor as well as attack, basically rendering them useless. This makes it so the doctor is wasting his bonus action to essentially just take damage every turn, and so long as he has a sister to resurrect, we just focus on blasting him before distancing ourselves with a dash. We keep up this routine for a while, just dishing out damage with blasts and backlashes, though it does get made longer since some of the nurses can patch up their head honcho. Eventually we get past his health threshold where he starts multi-attacking, and this can be a pretty scary series of blows if it does land, so we just make sure to kite a bit more carefully so that he's forced to dash instead of swinging. One such way we do this is by heading up these bookshelves to the balcony, since he can't actually go up that way and is forced to dash all the way around. Because of this fantastic plan and all these little tricks, Malice doesn't stand much of a chance, and we take him out with a Psionic Backlash, with his last nurse getting a classic Sea Blast. And throughout the whole fight we took only a single point of damage thanks to our temp HP and damage reduction. Now there's just one last township tyrant to take out in a tussle, Thisibald Thorm. He is a bartender though, and nice enough to pour a straight up malicious drink and ask for our story. We pray to the only god we know will hear us, ourselves, and down his malodorous mead. Then we get storytelling with the help of thaumaturgy, and that goes just as well, surprisingly. Another drink gets down successfully, though that's less surprising, and Michelle is not looking too hot. But we get one more story out to distract us with a truly incredible hot streak of rolls, and finish off our little session with one more sip of this fetid brew, causing the bloated bartender to blow up. Not usually how we choose to blow people up. I was really expecting to have to spend 1,000 rounds blasting him, but hey, turns out Michelle is better with her words than she's given credit for. Since the town has been secured under our rule, we head back into the Gauntlet of Shar to finish up the trials that will let us find the relic Ketheric is looking for, the presumed source of his immortality. Starting with the soft step trial, we just need to make it to the end without getting spotted by roaming shadows, which really isn't too hard. We just hop over the traps, misty step through a window, then through the gate at the end, and grab the umbral gem awaiting us. After that is the self-same trial. That means we've got to beat up a clone of ourselves with our current gear and none of our qualms about harming others. So to get around part of the challenge, we strip ourselves clean before activating it. Then we creep up on the false mind freak with our gear back on and start blasting away. She tries to get us with a guiding bolt, but that only makes Psionic Backlash trigger, and all it takes after that is one more blast for us to win our next umbral gem. Last up is the Faith Leap trial. We just got to get to the other side by using an invisible pathway, or as we prefer to do it, use our jump spell to give us some mad hops and jump from statue platform to statue platform, making sure to jump down to the invisible path before the final hop, otherwise we get sent back to the start. And that's gem number 3. Unfortunately, we need 4 in total, and we've no idea where the last one is, but we catch sight of a cool looking cat and chase it into the dark, where we get ambushed by Yurgir, the fiendish figure Raphael had warned us about. He gives us a bit of a musical rendition that leaves our ears damaged and Michelle looking absolutely unimpressed, and then tries to murder us for not applauding, but Michelle ain't no pushover, especially since our precasted sanctuary makes it so all the enemies just have to stare at us for this first round. We spend a few rounds luring the kitty over to the edge, and get real impressed by its tentacles. How cool would it be if we could turn into that? Then we use a force tunnel to displace the displacer beast into the void. Yurgir hops down to avenge his very special cat. Seriously, do not look into the lore on their relationship. And we start blasting away at the Maragon who accompanied him. At around this point though, the awful Orthon starts to go invisible at the end of each of his turns, and our C invisibility eye never reveals him. He just kinda stops making saves for it. We pick off a few of his goons, while the rest of them are stuck standing about for some unknown reason, and the big Y keeps shooting away at us. Eventually, we try casting the C invisibility spell using a scroll, but that makes literally no difference either, and since we can't see him, we can't damage him. Unfortunately, this means we've gotta let him live. We cast Sanctuary and just run up to his throne, where we yoink the last gem before running away and hitting the flee button. You win this one, Yergi boy. After acquiring all 4 gems though, we now have the means to end Ketheric's immortality and become the new supreme force in these lands. Just to be safe, we still decide to have a bit of a training arc before we start all that. We go off and bully the local fauna, decimating the avian population, and do something very similar to the local flora as well, so that all fear the name Michelle Mindfreak. To ensure the birds and trees don't think we're picking on them unfairly, we also make a point to go after the local fish as well, leaving them in tatters just the same. Now that we've done a bit of training, we head to the center of town where a Sharon statue resides with a secret. Michelle pushes in the northern, then western, then eastern facing plaques to reveal a hidden passage underneath. Once inside, we get the chance to make a saving throw for each mental stat, and as we succeed them one by one, we get a +5 to those stats until our next long rest, which won't be for a while. With our mental capacity stronger than it's ever been before, we head back to the mausoleum where we use our gems to pop open the locked gate at the bottom. Then descend into the portal to the Shadowfell that awaits us. Time to find what's on the other side. And boy, is there something on the other side. A prison where a lone figure sits at the bottom, but no prison will ever be able to stop Michelle. Once there, we talk to the Night Song, who greets us by saying this, like, okay, if you're gonna act like that, we could just leave you here. After a bit of conversation though, the Night Song reveals not only is she the source of Papa Thorm's immortality, but she would also be in debt to us if we set her free. So we do just that, and Dame Aelin, the demigod daughter of Selûne, is reborn. And just like that, she's off to take out the ruler of this place on our behalf, but she definitely seems like she'll be needing some help, so we go to follow. We arrive at Moonrise and see it drenched in holy flames and blood, with even more people waiting for us inside, but we're far too wily and far too clever to take the front entrance. Instead, we head towards the eastern side, where we find some roots that let us climb upwards. And with a good few jumps, we continue to not only get higher, but circle around to the back of the tower, where we find an easily breakable wall that takes us right near the entrance of where Ketheric went on a smoke break all that time ago. We make sure to do our usual pre-combat setup before sauntering on up to the guards, one of which is our old friend Flaming Fist Marcus. Time to show him why he never should have summoned all those hands on us. Michelle starts by blasting one of the necromites, which barely survives, and we follow up with a repulsor, finishing off the one and hurting everyone else in the room. Marky Mark gets us with a good couple whacks, and the necromancer in the room blows us up with a fireball straight to the face, so we actually do take some damage. Since she also starts summoning some substandard skeletons, she makes herself priority number 1 for blasting, and we start using our potions to heal up so we don't die before we get to the real fights. With another round going by, we get banged up again pretty good, with even the necromites getting in on the action. But hold up for a second. That's an awful lot of damage for that attack to do despite magic necrotic resistance. Now, I didn't realize anything quite just yet, but keep that in mind. That's foreshadowing. The enemy spend the next couple rounds completely whiffing attacks, which takes a lot of the tension off, as we land a couple blasts on our fireball slinging necromancer. Speaking of, she makes the mistake of trying to sling one when she's at low health, which results in a very satisfying call the weak. With her out of the way and Marcus out of channel divinity charges to boost his attack rolls, it's really not hard to blast down the remaining necromites and get into a complete slugfest with our Flaming Fist friend. Thankfully, when he's alone, his attacks only barely break our temp HP, so he's not a threat at all, and like most of our fights, it ends up being just a matter of time. Then we're up to the roof where we meet an enraged and befuddled Ketheric Thorm. He thinks he's hot stuff, but trust me, we're hotter, with not one incredible intimidation check, but 2, we put him in his place, and leave him quaking in his boots as he's forced to admit something that's music to our ears. But then Aelin shows up and ruins the fun for everyone, reigniting Thorm's pride and causing a fight to break out. Ketheric uses deadly orders on us, which gives all enemies attacking us advantage, but we also have Sanctuary up, so that doesn't do much. Susdera, on the other hand, lights up the fight with yet more fireballs towards Aelin. On our turn, we prioritize buffing our Divine Thrall with protection from evil and good, as well as a healing word, which also gives Bless for a couple turns. And boy does she prove her worth. She gets a beautiful first swing, and oh no, she got knocked prone by a shield bash, and then clobbered to death by the K-Man himself before she did anything else. Why do I even bother? Well, maybe it was just a fluke. Let's heal her up with a Cure Wounds and see if this time goes better. She does get an incredible opportunity attack, but then she falls prone to a shield bash again, and this time gets fireballed, looking like it might be on us. So, time to get blasting. We go after the big man since his deadly orders is by far the biggest nuisance at the moment, as well as get a nice stage fight on a lot of our enemies before running behind a pillar for hopeful cover. Aelin wakes up and immediately shoves a dude off the roof, and then gets instantly hit by the first attack against her, and she's down yet again, causing Ketheric to come up and frighten us with his sheer gravitas. All it takes to send him reeling, however, is one more good blast. Turns out our thrall is just as useless in cutscenes, as a big tentacle gets conjured by Thorm to whack her to the ground, and we finally get a second taste of tentacular teleportation as Thorm takes his Night Song imprisoned again and vanishes. If we get tentacles, are we gonna be able to teleport too? Either way, the fight picks up again, and without deadly orders, the necromites really struggle to hit us. Though Susdera certainly does not, with a massive fireball landing right on our face and taking us real low. Not wanting to tempt fate, we whip out the old sanctuary and start using healing pots to fix ourselves back up. A couple turns later, when we're feeling much more up to snuff, we pull the heinous act of putting down Ketheric's dog with a blast. Afterwards, we retreat far enough away that most of the necromites have to spend their turns dashing towards us. This results in an absolutely beautiful pile of enemies for us to just move into and blow up with maybe the world's most satisfying repulsor. Then we blast the sole survivor, and when it goes down, every other necromite that was spawning but just standing around finally aggroes onto us. Regardless, they can't keep up with our survivability. Even if it does take a tedious amount of time to take him out, we still eventually get them all. It was bad enough letting Yrgir get away alive, and we are certainly not letting Ketheric do the same, which means it's time to jump into a big ol' fleshy pit. Michelle arrives in a Mind Flayer colony teeming with intellect devourers, aka walking bags of experience, so we get a blasting. There's quite a few packs of them roaming around the place, which is good news for us since most of them just take one blast to kill. Elsewhere in the colony, we find pods of Illithids and innocents alike waiting to be freed, but we don't need more competition, and we certainly can't pass up an opportunity to evaporate some innocents. So we purge the pods and send them all the way of the dodo. That finally gets us enough experience for a level 8 and level 5 in Cleric. Once again, this is a level where we don't gain a ton past spell slots, though we do gain access to level 3 spell slots as well, which are going to be key in the fight to come. Trust me. A level up isn't the only thing we're looking for in this colony. There's something else we need at the other side of this room packed with baddies. Not wanting to attract all their attention, we decide to down a potion of invisibility and creep our way across. Once we get across, we find a puzzle awaiting us. Thankfully, it connects to our parasite-riddled brain, and we're able to use our vast intellect and powers to solve it easy peasy, which opens up a door and lets us grab a disembodied brain in a jar. Hopping on over to a different part in the room, we also find the Resonance Stone, which is a regular old object that we can hold in our inventory, and it emits an aura called Steeped in Bliss. This gives everyone in the aura advantage on physical checks, disadvantage on all mental saves, and also vulnerability to psychic. It doesn't work on undead and constructs, so for now we send it to camp, but it is prone to bugging out and breaking, so fingers crossed it still works once we get to Act 3. Well, in the same spot, we plug the brain into a machine and have a brief chat where it tells us it can give us a new psionic technique if we kill it. And hey, that's a double whammy for us, so we do just that and get the Githzerai Mind Barrier permanent boon, granting us advantage on any and all intelligence saving throws. A pretty simple effect, but hey, the best ones always are. Now we're finally ready to head to the depths. We descend and our parasite squirms and our stomach churns. It's showtime, do or die, what will almost undoubtedly be the hardest fight in the game. As we arrive, we lurk in the shadows and eavesdrop as we spot the other two chosen of the Absolute, Gortash and Orin. Turns out we've got it a little bit backwards. The Absolute, a giant elder brain, is in fact under their control, and this is all some wicked plot by the gods of the dead. Thankfully, the others get going and leave just Ketheric by himself. We'll get to the other two later. They've got it coming if they think they can outplot Michelle. With them gone, we prep with resistance, down a potion of invisibility, and sneak to the back of the room to free our thrall yet again. When we do, Ketheric starts yapping away, talking up a big game. We give him one last chance to surrender and admit we're the superior villain, but it just doesn't take, and our final fight breaks out. The big Thorm starts by using deadly orders on Aelin, and yeah, I mean she's not lasting long anyways, especially when the nearby Mind Flayer stuns her a half second later. Also, an enthralled Isabel is here, but she really isn't doing much but using the oft ineffective Sacred Flame against us. Since we're surrounded, we go for a repulsor in the hopes we can take out some intellect devourers as well as push the Mind Flayer into the pit. None of this works out unfortunately, as Mind Flayers are apparently immune to such antics. So we just get blasting since there's not much else we can do. Worth mentioning, Ketheric is spawning more and more necromites every turn while using deadly orders. Aelin gets dominated, which is actually kinda nice, since when we blast some more we top up our HP, and then a necromite spawning takes our pathetic thrall back down. The first part of this fight is mostly just intellect devourers missing us while we try and blast down the Mind Flayer. When said Flayer of Noggins levitates away, we use a stage fright on the amassing necromite horde to keep them at bay, and turn on the nearby cranial cronies to thin them down. In just a couple of rounds, we're able to blast down the irate Illithid and prove we've already got superior powers. Unfortunately, the necromites are getting a little out of hand, and with deadly orders, they're really starting to hurt. We try and focus on Isabel next, since she's kinda just annoying, and also start burning through our limited potion supply. By the time we do take her out, the skeleton stampede has gotten a little out of control. Since they each spawn with Armor Vagathus as of the most recent patch, it takes us 2 blasts for each one, and 1 spawns each turn, which means we've really got to take out Ketheric if we don't want to burn through all of our health potions. Each round is getting harder and harder to survive though, so we've got to do it fast. To make matters worse, the range of our blast is so terrible that we need to move onto the low ground to be able to hit him, which gives our foes a high ground boost on their attack rolls. That goes as well as you think it would. We use jump on a future turn to grant us a bit more mobility so we can actually maneuver to hit Papa Thorn, but things are getting dicey. Oh, and did I mention mention that Ketheric has armor that reduces all damage by 2, meaning he fully negates our Callous glow ring and further reduces Sea Blast damage too. Since we were hemorrhaging health potions far more than I thought we would at this point, I took a close look at the damage rolls and realized the Necromite's damage was not being reduced by our magical necrotic resistance nor our non-magical damage reduction from Heavy Armor Master. So that's not cool. In a Hail Mary, we used an Elixir of Necrotic Resistance in case that jogs something. And miracle of miracles, it actually works. Now we're in a much better spot. We get back to doing hit and runs on the big bad evil guy and finally manage to take him out, proving us superior once and for all. He starts yapping again with a prayer to his god, and you know what? If his god wants to help him, so be it. What's a bigger challenge for Michelle? Okay, can I take that back? Wanna go back to yapping? Okay, we've made it to phase 2 and there's a lot of Necromites around. That might be a concern. Myrkul starts by hitting us with the Gaze of the Dead, which deals a ton of damage and also frightens us, meaning we can't move. Then hits everyone in the arena while pulling them closer, including us. This is extra bad since he's got a Bone Chill aura, making healing impossible next to him, so we Misty Step scroll far away, heal up with a potion, and end our turn with resistance. Going forward, we'll make a point of doing that so it can help us meet his very high spell save DCs. We make the Frighten save next time, and the pull doesn't get us either, plus it is pretty helpful since it's thinning down the skeleton horde. From here, the game plan is simple. Blast him for reduced damage, since apparently he's still wearing Ketheric's armor, and then skedaddle away and hope we can out-heal the damage we take every turn. Soon we figure out we can blast him from right under his little elevated area, and if we stand right about here, his pull doesn't actually pull us thanks to these little finger bone things. Which means getting frightened is no longer a huge deal, since if we do, we can still heal without worry of getting pulled. To make things better, the Skeletal Sovereign finishes off most of his underlings the next turn. After quite a few turns of just sitting here and trading blows, he activates Myrkul's Call, so we use Sanctuary to keep him away. His call lets his skeletons that he spawns each round sacrifice themselves to heal him for an absurd amount, and give him access to Finger of Death, a very powerful spell. Now, you might think it's impossible for us to win at this point, and normally you'd be right, but our Discord community did some testing. Specifically, user Damon realized if you survive enough rounds after Myrkul starts munching, he just stops spawning more guys. So all we need to do is survive a bajillion turns of his AoE attack, which after our resistance and damage reduction deals an average of 10 points of damage to us each round. Since we gain 8 temp HP by casting resistance every turn, so long as we keep up Sanctuary, we are pretty much in the clear. At round 58, we are finally done waiting him out and get back to blasting. Now it's just a damage race. He tanks our blasts, we take his Gaze of the Dead, and Call of the Damned. Round 82, we take him below half health. Round 90, we run out of potions and start using spell slots to heal ourselves with Healing Word. Round 99, we use our last 2nd level spell slot. 104, and our last 3rd level spell slot is gone. Round 106, and we slay the Apostle of Myrkul with only our mind. Ha! Get mind flayed, bozo. Myrkul's material form disintegrates to ashes. Aelin wakes up from her nap to kill steal, and we grab Ketheric's shiny important looking stone. As well as his armor, Reaper's Embrace. Besides just looking real cool, this 19 AC armor reduces all damage by 2, as we know, and has a toggleable passive to make us immune to being moved at the cost of having disadvantage on dex saves. It also has the Howl of the Dead cantrip attached to it, which we can't use due to our challenge run, but this armor is basically just a +1 to our AC. We get out of the stanky flesh pit, whereupon Dame Aelin offers to join our camp, and while we do like traveling alone, we may yet have use for her, so we acquiesce. Our crush that lives in our head rent-free rings us up for a quick hype session, and then we're hitting the road where we embark towards Baldur's Gate at last, in the hopes of becoming a true psionic master. Thank you all so much for watching. Here's the stats for this act, as well as some truly astounding artwork by Cryptic Renegade over on Instagram. Go check them out. Let me tell you, when I woke up and saw this posted on our Discord server, which you should really join, there's a link in the description, I was completely flabbergasted, flummoxed even. This is how I'm hoping Michelle looks to all of her enemies. But once again, thank you all. There should be the first Act 3 stream going live the day after this video comes out, and a very special thanks to our Storyteller tier members here on YouTube, Bunny Warren, Player 5, Damon, Larry Renzokuken, and The Big Yeet.